look around, not be able to find any jobs, go work in a bar for 6 months, learn to surf, travel, and then go back home. That is the worst thing that could happen. But what's the best thing that could happen? You know?
Hello and welcome to Promote the Hell Out of It. My name is Misael Trujillo and this is the podcast where I talk to people worth promoting about subjects we should all be talking about. And first things first, you might have noticed that the show is being released on a different day of the week. I am switching things around and from now on we'll be releasing on Monday. So stay alert because we have some incredible guests lined up which I am really excited to share with you all. And my guest for today's show is my very good friend Alex Mills. He's an account director and he is content and social media marketing specialist. But when I met Alex years ago, and we talk about this a bit on the show, he was working with Zune Music, launching Microsoft First Music streaming and download service. I'm not sure if you remember Zune Music right now, but it was a big deal at the time. And me and Alex have toured with his old band Home Advantage. We have DJ'd together. We even DJ'd Heavy Music Festival, which was an incredible experience. And then he did a big career change and moved over to Australia and has been having amazing success working on some incredible companies, including the wonderful We Are Social a while back, and he is currently at We Communications as account director. I really enjoyed this conversation. We talk about how to do a big move, how to move country, move career, and the successes, the difficulties that come with that kind of change. So it is really helpful and I really hope you enjoy it. This episode is sponsored by our very good friends over at Nextstand. Please go check them out. They are absolutely wonderful and it is your last chance this week to enter the competition we currently have on to win some amazing goodies. So go check that out. Let us know what you think. Let us know what your favourite episode is, tagging us into social media, and you stand the chance of winning some goodies. So without any further ado, here is my episode with the lovely Alex Mills. Alex, I am really excited to catch up because it's been a long time. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm really good, mate. It must be, we've chatted on and off, but it will be nearly 5 years.
I know, 5 years, that's ridiculous. And I know, we've chatted, like you say, on Skype a couple of times, but it's not the same. It's not the same seeing someone and giving them a hug than chatting over the internet.
Yeah, but this, we might get into it as we chat. But the thing I always say to a lot of people when people are like, "Oh, do you miss your friends and your family back home?" And the thing I say to them is, obviously I do, but at the same time, with social media these days, I know it's very much through a filter. But it's very easy to know what your friends are getting up to, and they can see what you're getting up to just by watching each other's Instagram profile. And so when I do catch up with people I've not seen for years, they'll be like, "Oh yeah, I saw your trip to wherever, or I saw you went to that festival, or you watched that band," anything like that. And it just, anytime I've caught up with people in my last visits back home, for the first time I've seen them in 4 years, 3 years, literally it just feels like you pick up where you left off. You crack open a beer and you chat, and maybe some of you, your hair's a bit grayer or your gut's a bit bigger, but generally it feels like nothing's changed.
But that's the friends you want. That's the kind of people that are friends that stick around and that aren't friends that are based around circumstance, around club nights and stuff. You want people that, regardless of seeing them 5-10 years on, you care about each other, you've kept up as best you can, and you're excited to chat again, and it feels like no time's passed at all.
Yeah, exactly. Couldn't agree more.
So let's start at the start, at least at the point where I met you. What were you doing in London?
So in London at that time, that would have been, we met around 2011, 2012, and I remember at that time I was basically, early to mid-20s, working in a digital marketing job, doing content management for a music streaming service. Not one of the ones that everyone uses now, but a pretty big music streaming service at the time, which was a very good way for me to pay the bills, enjoy working in the music industry for a good company, and then at the same time have a bit of a hobby of playing in an independent punk rock band and doing a lot of DJing of club nights in London. And when I say DJing, it wasn't really like mixing or doing actual disc jockeying. It was pressing play on picking CDs, and I guess we'd call ourselves party liaisons. And it's just picking the right kind of rock songs for those kind of nostalgic rock nights. And I guess that's how you and I kind of built our friendship from there. I think at first we didn't even know we necessarily played instruments, but we DJ, we had very similar taste, played a lot of the same music, and gradually kind of, you know, our musical projects ended up kind of forming friendships, and that was it. But yeah, so it was a mixture of working in a marketing job that happened to be music whilst playing music as a pastime hobby.
Yeah, and how much would you say that wanting to be involved in music in any way you could influence your decision making at that point, like the jobs you took, the places you went, and the people you hung out with?
Yeah, pretty much everything. Like, I for listeners now, I am someone that's basically like a advertising account director slash producer, and it surprises people when they're like, I started off in the music business. It just so happened that kind of my route into this career path was through a love of music, which came from doing a radio show at university, and that got me my first job, which was helping manage digital ringtones. We're going back, 10 years now, 11 years. It was managing classic ringtones back in the day. And I didn't even know that was digital marketing then. I was just like, I'm doing a job in music. But, gradually that I went down that path of content management in music. But to me, at that time, I was just, I'm just promoting music. It pretty much dictated everything I did back then. And it's still a huge, huge, huge pastime of mine. But, 75% of what I did then was music, and then the other 25% was following football.
Yeah, okay. So then if we look at your progression and the changes that you've made, quite a major change is your outlook on music, really, right?
Yeah and no. Like, it's one of those things where, working in music or being involved in music, number one, you change over time as you get older. You notice a lot of people will say music's not the same. Not so much music's not the same as when you were younger, but you will always have more of a connection to the music from your youth than necessarily now. You might always still discover great music and great bands, and people will release great albums, but you'll never have that same connection to something from like when you were between 14 to 19 or whatever. And I guess particularly where I live now, music's still something I very much enjoy, but it doesn't formulate my entire social circle, essentially.
Yeah.
Nor is it particularly part of my career anymore, which gives it a nice. It means that I can kind of just go and watch and enjoy bands, and there's no ulterior motive beyond I'm watching a band because I want to watch them and enjoy it.
Yeah, absolutely. And all of this is taking place in London. What changed about your perspective of staying in that city?
Quite a lot of things. So what happened? So in that time period between you and me kind of meeting, where I'm working in a job in music, playing in a band, a few things happened where I realised that the way my career was progressing in music it was a narrow box and it had a glass ceiling, and I noticed very quickly that I wasn't really learning many skills. I wasn't learning much about kind of strategy. I wasn't learning much about creativity or production. It was just kind of very reactive. This album's coming out, make sure that the metadata is ingested on your system and you've got the correct artwork assigned, yada, yada, yada. Yeah. There's a certain, being transparent, money isn't that great. And I just kind of realized, and I was made redundant from that role, and it took me quite a long time to find a job after that because what I was doing was very niche. So in the back of my mind I was kind of thinking, well, how can I expand my skill set while still doing work I enjoy doing? So I ended up doing a postgraduate diploma in digital marketing, which got me a bit more aware of other forms of marketing, whether that's search engine optimization or mobile marketing or social media and the basics of it. And I took another role in music. I managed to get another role at another big music retailer, kind of doing a lot of their digital, and it gave me more opportunities to do bigger things like activations and physical to digital activations, testing out new technology, which sparked a desire to continue to go down this route. And that's when I realized at that time the industry was still resistant to change, and I kept wanting to test out new ideas and new things, and I felt quite limited by what I could do. The band I was in at the time also broke up, which was fine. We'd hit that kind of ceiling of do we either step out of being a DIY local band and invest in outside support to help us, whether that's booking agents, management, or do we continue being a hobby band that opens up local shows? Some of us wanted to go one route, some of us wanted to go the other route, and we ended up breaking up. And so that was that. And I tried doing a bit of jamming with people after, but never quite landed anywhere. So I lost a real creative. I felt like I lost quite a big part of my identity, and I felt like I'd lost a real big creative output. Roughly around that same time, I ended up wanting to try a completely different career path. So I left my music job to go to just another digital marketing job at a major big telecommunications company, which at the time I was lured into because they did a lot of sports broadcasting, so I was quite interested in doing a bit more kind of around that, and then just learning different skills. But it's quite a good company, but quite a corporate culture, and didn't really feel like it was inspiring for me. Money was great, the work-life balance was fantastic, it was very cushy, but I wouldn't be going in. I'd just be going in feeling numb, because I'd be being like, I'm going in, clocking in another 8 hours today, and I don't really care. Taking my paycheck home. Yeah, taking my paycheck home, not really feeling like I've got something to invest in afterwards. I might go to the gym or I'd go to the pub, and it just kind of felt a bit. So I got to this point where, towards the end in London, I'd lost quite a big part of my identity as no longer someone that works in the music industry, no matter how, not saying I was a big shot in the industry by any way, shape or form, but it's just one of those extra things where you do notice certain friends and acquaintances don't give you the same clout or the same time. And then losing that big creative output meant I didn't really have like a passion project to invest my time in. So I kind of just felt like I was suddenly in the London rat race of get up, go to work, go home, go to the pub, watch the football, whatever. And I was suddenly kind of missing, it just kind of felt like I was just existing and not really living with much of a purpose at the time, which left me pretty unfulfilled, and it inspired me to take a bit of drastic action to address that.
So what was the first step you took? You realised you need to do something. What was the first thing that you did to at least know where you'd go from there?
So what happened was a friend of mine who, again, I'd played in bands with and had a long-standing friendship with, he'd gone off travelling around New Zealand and a lot of Asia and ended up settling in Australia. Somewhere that I'd always thought, yeah, cool, Australia, great, but never really had much of a desire to travel around there or anything. It would always be nice, but it was never like top of the list. That's until I discovered Parkway Drive, and then suddenly it became heaven. But he ended up coming to Australia, working at Universal Music, and then ended up getting a job at Spotify. And they flew him back to London just to do some training and induction, and we met up. I was explaining the situation, and he was a bit like, if you want to go back into music, maybe it's just you want to go into a more senior role in music, and there were probably opportunities for you to do that in Australia, because at the time the market was a little bit less advanced than in the UK and in the US and some European markets. So he was just like, you could probably do really well there. They could give you a kind of big strategic or kind of creative directorial role. You've got digital experience. I think you'd be really you'd be quite sought after. Why don't you just like speak to the people and see and go for my old job, because there's vacancies. And so again, at that time there was a few things going on in my head, and I thought, why not have a chat, at least like get back into the kind of process of interviewing with people. So I did that, and the seed was planted there, and I didn't end up progressing to like I got to the close to the final stages, but I didn't get to the very end. And there's a number of reasons why that could be, but one of them was probably the successful candidate was already in the country. You know, interviewing over Skype is quite awkward, and I kind of just, you know, I was like, oh well, there we go, okay, staying in the UK. Carried on for a bit of time where again I was feeling a little bit just disillusioned, a bit meh. There was another scenario. There was another situation where around that time, a friend of mine actually passed away in quite a sad accident, and it was one of those moments of just like life. You know, you always have that when you ever hear of a tragic accident. Life is short. There's no need to have like petty grudges against people or anything like that. Thankfully, the last time I saw him was one of the incredible. Like we were at a gig, I think, and we'd not seen each other for like weeks, and we had a big hug, chatted about football, sang along to the band. So beside the point, it was amazing that's my final memory of him. But it was just one of those where I thought a lot of things of like, wow, life is really short, etc., etc. And I, you know, I was at the final point of being able to apply for working holiday visas and really travel before you become a bit too old to do that sort of stuff. So I continued just thinking about it, and then eventually I just was speaking to more people living out here, more of these people that are new living and working here. I think you'd really enjoy it here. I think that, you know, you love the beach, you love the sun. You're always kind of, as soon as the sun's out in the UK, you're wearing a vest top and a backwards hat, you know. And the market's booming out here. And it was when I talked to my parents about it, and they were both like, I actually think, yeah, it could be a really good move for you. And my sister was a bit like, yeah, you know, feels like you've given London 8 to 10 years and you've got what you need out of it. And it was when I spoke to that friend again, and he said, mate, the worst thing that can happen, you could just come out here on like a working holiday travel visa, look around, not be able to find any jobs, go work in a bar for 6 months, learn to surf, travel, and then go back home. And that was when I was like, that is actually like, that is the worst thing that could happen. But what's the best thing that could happen, you know? So that was it. So I waited a year in my job, kind of ticked off a few kind of projects under my belt, and then I handed in my resignation and said, I'm going to move to Australia. Going to go on a working holiday visa, go out there, nothing but a laptop and a suitcase, and just network and see what opportunities I can get. And then I didn't really plan to travel. I just planned to base myself in Sydney, and then consider travel options at a later date. Maybe regard it in a way people travel around Europe. You know, they work in the city and then they might spend a long weekend in Milan or whatever. Here I work in Sydney and spend a long weekend in Melbourne, whatever. And so basically that was it. And then I came out to Sydney. That would be November 2015. So it's approaching 4 years. And started the big adventure, which here I am, and it's given me some pretty crazy opportunities, which we'll get into.
Incredible. Yeah. Let's backtrack just a little bit, because I'm interested in some practical steps for people who maybe want to follow that route. Because I think part of the interesting thing about these episodes is listening to people's experiences and maybe hopefully identifying with some of them and being able to replicate at least parts of those processes. So for someone that maybe wants to do something similar, what are the practical steps you took to tie up loose ends in the UK before you went over to Australia?
I sold as many things as I could. That was one thing I did. You know, obviously, the very most basic things, obviously, handed in the notice of my job.
Yeah, of course.
You know, with my current flatmates at the time, explained the decision, and we agreed on a time that we end the terminancy, etc.
Had you bought flights at that point?
I honestly don't remember. I think maybe I do remember buying my flights whilst I was at work. Whether I had handed in my resignation by that point or not, I can't remember. But I do remember speaking to STA, Student Travel Association, and they were kind of like, this will be the last point that you can, like, this will be the latest flight you can get before they start jacking the prices up before Christmas time.
Yeah. Excellent. So that made it real. If you've got the flights, you know you need to sort everything now.
Yeah, pretty much. So it's, handing in your notice, handing in your, and terminating the tenancy agreement. And by that point, I was like, the obvious thing, I think I'd got my visa long before I'd even made the decision. I actually think I got my visa. My friend sent me the link and said, just apply for the visa now. And I think I even just did it thinking, oh, it'll probably take months to arrive. And within a week, I got a phone call of like, do you want to process the visa? And I was like, oh, God, actually, no, not yet. If it's going to take this quick, I'd rather process the visa kind of later on, because when you get a visa, you have a certain entry period that you can go into the country you want. So I was like, well, I'm not going to be going anytime soon, so I'll process the visa later. So I think I got the visa approved in like June or July, and I didn't process it till September because I was like, I'm not going to move until then. But yeah, so then it was just selling a lot of things, selling all of my music equipment beyond my actual guitar. I sold all of my like amps and speakers because I loved that guitar. Trying to sell old clothes, or at least throw stuff out that wasn't sellable. I remember going down to Computer Exchange with about 4 suitcases full of DVDs, which I probably got in total. I probably got about £40 for it all. Literally for about God knows how many DVDs. Some of them I was literally getting 1p for, but I was literally like, look, it's only gonna go in the bin, so at least I'm not polluting, just take it. I just got rid of as many things as I could. Moved out, stayed with my parents for about between 2 weeks and a month, I think. So rent sorted. So that's and I'd been saving. Obviously, I'd been saving money. Not even necessarily for that trip. I just naturally was saving, just thinking to myself, I want to save to get on the property ladder and that sort of thing, or whatever else. I was putting money aside every month. But then because once I declared that I was leaving the country, I got a certain amount of tax returned as well. So I got that. So I just basically made sure that I had a comfortable amount of savings in my account to keep me going until I'd found work, basically.
I think it's useful for people to know what steps they need to take, and it's useful to have them outlined like that, because it's easy to overlook things, and most of the time it can be sorted anyway, but it is good to have the rough idea of what to do, right?
Yeah, definitely. And one thing I did do as well, in the weeks leading up, I started setting up kind of just a little tracker for myself, like it was like a Google spreadsheet of the things I needed to make sure that was sorted as quickly as possible. Started reaching out to recruiters in the area and locking in kind of. I had some conversations back in the UK, and for others it was just like exchanging details and saying, right, I'll come and meet you when I'm in Sydney. Registering on certain websites, Gumtree's, your flatmate kind of house share ones, Seek and recruiting companies, professional portfolio places, and then doing the research into kind of certain administrative things. Like in Australia, you have a tax file number, which I guess is kind of like your national insurance number, maybe. Registering for these sorts of things, looking at where you want to open your bank account, where you want to open, who you want to get a phone line with, having a checklist of things that you need to do in the first kind of week, 2 weeks when you're there, or anything that you can do leading up so that you've kind of landed on your feet when you're there. When it came to accommodation, I think I booked myself the first week's worth. Maybe I booked myself into an Airbnb and then a hostel. But then I got to a point where I was like, I kind of want to freestyle it from this point. And the first 3 weeks, I was going from mixing between hostels and Airbnbs. Kind of wanted the social element of being in a hostel, and it was a bit cheaper. And then there'd be this was like, okay, now I need to stay in a B&B for a bit, have a private room, have access to washing, ironing, etc., etc.
So when you get there, what's the first thing you focus on? Because you've got the moving to a new country side of paperwork side of things, you've got finding accommodation, which I'm guessing was a big priority, and the work. What was your priority first?
Oh, I mean, to be honest, work was a bit lower. No, it wasn't low on the priority, but it was getting an idea of where I wanted to base myself. After doing the very obvious things of opening a bank account, getting a phone number, seeing the first couple of people that you want to see. I think the first couple of nights I actually went to 2 gigs in like my first 3 days there. I went to like a kind of punk and metal gig, and then I also went to see Jason Derulo. So that gives your listeners an idea of the diversity of what I'm into. But yeah, no, it was kind of just staying in the different areas and getting a feel what kind of neighborhood is going to be more interesting for me. Sydney is a city where you've got some absolutely incredibly beautiful beaches, and that's wonderful. The downside of that is not all of them are that accessible. You have to be prepared to have quite a long commute to get into work. There's lots of traffic. Not everywhere has good public transport. So if you're prepared to sit on a bus for 45 minutes, then great. If not, then you might want to be in one of the more inner city suburbs. Same with your interests. The beaches are all very nice, but you know, you think of somewhere like LA and Venice Beach, and there's this kind of like skateboarding and hip hop kind of culture. The beaches in Sydney are basically people with plastic surgery that will want to be Instagram models. You kind of want to go into the city if you want that kind of edgy, kind of quote unquote alternative or bohemian kind of vibe. But so I kind of stayed in different areas, and then eventually I did settle towards the beaches. Not because I'm a wannabe influencer, but because I was like, I have to at least experience living near or by the beach. And at the time, actually, to be honest, I'm being a bit harsh on this particular beach. This is Bondi Beach for any of your Australian listeners. You know, I didn't know it at the time. At the time, everyone said Bondi's full of backpackers and travelers. And I was like, well, that's going to be an easy way to meet people. And it's the most accessible one. It's the one with a train line. It is it's the most popular beach because it's one of the better beaches. So I settled on there for a bit, and I had a really good couple of years there. But yeah, kind of one of the first priorities was just finding my feet. I've been lucky enough to be introduced to a lot of either mutual friends or reconnecting with old friends I've not seen for years. So I already in the first 2.5 weeks started building a bit of a social kind of network, a bit of a social scene. Friends would just introduce me to people they knew and said, you guys should catch up over a coffee. Even whether that's as a professional kind of working in a similar industry, or whether that's just you're a mate, you guys will get on. So there was an element of that as well, just starting to meet people and feel like I'm starting to build a bit of a social life.
That's so important in feeling at home in a place, absolutely. I want to touch on one thing because I don't know what the situation is in Australia. What about like signing up to a doctor's or anything like that? How easy is that?
Oh yeah, no, I mean, it is and it isn't. You sign up for a thing called Medicare. I honestly don't even remember how I did it. I think I had to go into a centre and give them stuff, and then they gave me a card, and that's it. Medicare is something that I think if you're part of the Commonwealth, you're entitled to it.
Okay, yeah, perfect.
But I think you don't get full entitlement. Generally what happens is you go to a doctor, you pay for seeing the doctor. If you have full Medicare, i.e. Australian citizen, you get a full refund. If you are a Commonwealth person, you get a partial refund. And I think for non-Commonwealth people, maybe you have to have been here a certain amount of time to do it. You also have to get private health insurance, but you don't really have to do that until you know that you're going to be here medium to long term. But yeah, that was one of the first things I did. It wasn't the top priority because, if I'd go to see a doctor if I needed to, but at the time I didn't. That was one of, kind of in the first week, 2 weeks, it was getting those sorts of things out of the way.
Of course. And then the job opportunity, how did that come about?
So I was meeting a lot of recruiters and also just networking and meeting up with anyone that I'd been introduced to that was kind enough to meet up for coffee. And I ended up getting a job at Salesforce, which is a very short-term contract, which, again, at the time I maintain I don't quite know how I got it. It was a fantastic company, nothing but great things to say about them. But just, at the time they just needed a short-term freelance person to help with some digital stuff. And I went in there and did it. But that was another one and the recruiter was just like, look, we'll put you on a short, 6-week contract, option to extend it. And I did, and great people, great company. But again, it was going back to kind of the job I'd left back in London, where it just wasn't what I was passionate about doing. I was sat there thinking, would I be doing this on minimum wage? Probably not. This isn't me doing anything that's creatively stimulating for me. So I did it, and it was great to do because it at least just showed potential employers that I've come here and I've already got myself on the Australian job market. I've got some experience, and it shows that I'm not basically just a backpacker milling around. So I did the placement, and then again I finished up the contract. Said thank you very much, really appreciate the job, and if and when I meet people that might be relevant, I will 100% recommend them to you. And then I continued back on the job hunt, trying to find something that was more in my kind of realm of creative digital work in the music or in the sports sphere. And within a month, I'd say, I ended up getting a job at a creative agency, a social media specialist agency, which if your listeners go on Google, I'm sure they'll find the name. And they just won a big Australian telco, a big Australian broadcaster out here. And at the time, I was thinking, well, another telco, really? And they actually said, come in and we'll chat to you. We'll explain the role. And so I did, and I explained this telco that's traditionally been known as a regular telco, and it's trying to appeal to millennials by kind of focusing on music sponsorships and partnering with Spotify and with record labels to do big concerts and activations. And so they're going to need help to kind of promote this activity on social media. They've also secured the exclusive rights to the Premier League in Australia, which probably gives away who that telco is to a lot of your listeners. But we're going to need to create content around that. They're also sponsoring the Australian Olympic team, and I was just instantly like, sign me up. And so they took me on a contract role because this was a new kind of experience for me. This was an agency role, and for any of you listeners who've worked in agencies, that's very different to working in house. There's a lot of and the thing I would say to anyone is, if you want to do good in marketing or PR, work at an agency, because that makes you a much better marketer. If you're working in house, you're kind of sheltered and you're shielded, and you get your hands dirty working in agency, and that's where you learn. But the role ended up becoming full time, and it was that was where everything really started to shift, and I was becoming much more hands-on from a creative and content production perspective. It was again working in the areas that I loved. It was working in music. It was covering kind of exclusive gigs for competition winners, doing Q&As with artists, and curating content on Snapchat and Instagram for this brand. And then it was also working on kind of launching their Premier League coverage. Every morning, my colleague and I would wake up. What's happened overnight? Oh, okay. Claudio Ranieri's been sacked by Leicester. We need to turn around a really reactive kind of post to not promote that, but to be on top of the social conversation, or taking football highlights and packaging it in a really engaging way that's fit for social. And then covering the Olympics. So it was my second day at the job, my manager was like, oh, by the way, we're probably going to need you to go to Rio for the Olympics. And I was like, what? And so within the first year I was over in Rio, filming a social media chat show with the most decorated Australian Olympian of all time, a swimmer called Ian Thorpe, interviewing people on an inflatable chair in a pool in a full suit, and interviewing other Olympians, and we're cutting that into like 2-minute clips, putting it out on social media, and then also like creating again Snapchat and Instagram content behind the scenes. Literally, Australian Olympians are kind of showing off their medal, and you've got kind of big broadcasters there with their camera crew, like trying to get shots, and I'm there with my phone, literally taking shots on my phone. And I had some people looking at me like, who the fuck are you with? And I'm like, I'm with this telco company. And they're like, where's your camera kit? And it got to the point where some of like the Australian Olympic Committee is like, no, yeah, he's with us. He's doing their socials. And it was just a bizarre, and I still look back and I think that was such a bizarre but incredible opportunity.
That's amazing. That's amazing. It's great to see that pay off. And if you think back through your journey, what would you say are the biggest struggles you faced, or the most difficult aspects of doing that big change and that move?
The thing is, I mean, something like that big Olympics project was probably the biggest one, particularly as I was on my own. So I didn't have, I had my manager who was kind of like a mentor as well back in Australia. And he did say to me, I'm here at any point, and he said, you are going to have some incredible highs being out there. You're going to have some incredible lows being out there. Because I wasn't with my team, and I was just with clients. And when you're with clients, and particularly in a high pressure environment like that, there's definitely an element of kind of this, what's the right way to put it? You can tell there's a clear hierarchy, which is fine. But I guess for a lot of people, and I'd say this to anyone regardless of kind of what job you do, it's not always the best way to look as like customer vendor. It's better to look at like client consultant. And so that was a pretty big struggle at that time of kind of being able to navigate, whilst I was, number one, because I was still new to kind of agency world, and I was still relatively new to kind of the whole ways of production and creative, kind of producing creative content. So that, early on, that was kind of some of the struggles, is just dealing with the many different personalities that you get in that environment, whether that's kind of like clients that don't understand what goes on behind the scenes, then within an agency environment, dealing with different personalities, and that you're dealing with graphic designers who have certain personality traits, and then you're dealing with strategists and analysts who have other personality traits. So, and I think the other thing that was interesting was, by this point, I was a mid-senior level, but you're kind of suddenly starting to work with people a whole lot younger than you. So you're kind of having to learn how to manage people who maybe don't have the same level of emotional intelligence and that sort of thing. So yeah, I'd say.
Sorry, carry on.
No, yeah, I'd say that's it. It was just kind of that whole experience of a big project like that internationally, dealing with kind of the pressure of being on your own, and having to deal with kind of various personalities across the different time zones, dealing with the client with you, dealing with the team back in Australia, and kind of dealing with the different types of personalities that are involved in any kind of big production on that scale.
And what about play? I want to carry on down this route because I think it really highlights what you've overcome and how you've done it, and your strengths as well. What about the biggest struggles in actually moving to Australia and leaving London?
There's the obvious things like homesickness and that sort of thing. I'd say the biggest struggles I've had, to be honest, haven't necessarily been just because I've been in Australia. It's just been various struggles that have happened to do with, that would have been equally as big struggles if I was in London as if I was in Australia. I guess the difference is maybe you don't necessarily have, a sibling or a parent or someone like that can that you can kind of speak to and just have a shoulder to cry on, essentially. But I guess if we are just being very specific about this country, the struggles are, number one, I guess for all of the jobs I've been in, there's been many points where I've wanted to just pack it in and be like, fuck it, I'm out, I'm done. But if I do that, my right to live in this country is gone. So there's a number of times where I'm working 13 hours, I'm working 15 hours, and I'm sat there thinking, yeah, this isn't worth it, but then thinking, but then that's the dream of Australia gone. And it's quite a common thing in recruitment, is probably the number one that I hear of people. A lot of international people are sponsored as recruiters out here, and it's their way in, but then a lot of people find it really, really tough and draining. So that was one of the biggest struggles. But at the same time, like in all of the situations where I thought, you know what, like like when I've been tempted to quit, I've stuck it out, and I've been really grateful that I have that. So it's one of those things. So one of the things I guess for listeners is like, I always kind of think it's good to have an attitude when you're going through a real struggling time, is not have this mindset of why is this happening to me, but have this attitude of why is this happening for me? What am I going to benefit from doing this? And there's always going to be situations where you're thrown into the deep end and it sucks and it's stressful and it's gives you anxiety, whatever. There are also the times where you learn the most, and they're the times when you develop the most, and you figure out how to overcome an obstacle, and you take that learning and it makes you much better, whatever that's from a professional or personal standpoint. The worst thing that you can do is be mollycoddled and be sheltered from stuff. And that was the problem with my first job, the cushy first job doing music content management. It was a very easy gig, but I just wasn't learning.
And it's important. Literally, the podcast that I recorded yesterday, I talked to someone about just getting stuck in a rut. And that can happen the easiest when you are comfortable. When things are easy, it's very easy to stop moving forward, and then suddenly that company goes under or that contract ends and you find yourself in a situation when you're basically unemployable because you had an easy job. And no one wants to hire the person that had the easy job and who hasn't got that much experience, right?
Yeah, there was one recruiter I was speaking to, and I was talking about a couple of companies that would be interested to work for. I won't name any names, but just think the big companies. And she was like, there'd be absolutely no point in you working for them here because you wouldn't be actually doing anything hands-on. You'd just be kind of rolling out stuff that America is doing, and you're just rolling out in this market. You won't be learning or developing, but you'll be on a high salary because it's a big company like that. So you'll have this inflated salary expectation compared to kind of your experience level. So that's a really which again goes back to this idea of why I think people should always work at an agency. If, in my industry, I'm not saying everyone in every industry, but those sorts of scenarios build you very, very good skills. And if you eventually decide you want to work in-house, whatever, you also become better at managing agencies, and you'll get the best out of them.
Perfect. The last thing I want to touch on, because we've gone through the struggles, what have been your rewards? What have been the experiences you've got out of this big move you've done?
What are the big, I don't know, like fluffy answers of like, I feel like I've just grown and developed as a person, blah, blah, blah. But like, I guess when I first moved out here and I was just going through kind of basic things of like finding a neighborhood to live in, finding work, yada yada, it felt like a project. Then it felt like something. It was like a creative thing to me, even though it wasn't. It was just like trying to survive, but it just felt like a project and a thing to be doing. And I started a blog, and I still have this blog, and I don't update it as nearly as often as I say I'm going to. But it just became this thing of like, even mundane things that seemed mundane felt interesting and new to me. But the biggest benefit has again been just down to the career elements of it, in the sense that by putting myself in this situation and taking this risk, I've been in a situation where, in the previous job we've talked about, I went to Rio to film the Olympics. In my current job, which again, that was a bit of a step in the unknown, because I'm working at another advertising agency, and my client is a big kind of consumer tech company in kind of the creative space. But it wasn't an area that was something I was like a massive kind of, a massive evangelist for or anything like that. I'd used the software, but it wasn't something that I used every day. But I've learned and grown to love that brand and learned to love that project, their products, and I've been given the opportunity to go and produce and direct content shoots in Korea and in Vietnam. I've run like a weekly live stream program, worked with some incredibly talented influencers and created kind of campaigns all across Asia Pacific. All these sorts of things where sometimes I forget kind of to me, it's now just like, yeah, that's just what I do. It's a day to day. And sometimes I have to sit back and think, actually, this is kind of mind blowing. So it is just some of the opportunities from a career perspective just being incredibly rewarding. And that's the thing I've said to a lot of people is within the, if nothing else, ignore the fact that I've got to enjoy 4 years of living in one of the most beautiful cities in the world. Ignore the fact that I've got to travel all over the country as well, on holidays and that. Ignore the new friends I've made out here. Ignore the kind of, the love interests that have come in and out of my life in that time. If nothing else, it's just been those career opportunities that have been given to me. It's been by far the biggest rewards, because that's the sort of stuff where if it all fell apart tomorrow and I'd go back home, tail between my legs, and go back and stay on my parents' couch, I could sit there and go up to people and say, you know what, none of that could have happened had I not made the big move.
Absolutely. Alex, I have really, really enjoyed chatting to you. Is there anything that you would like to leave listeners with?
Well, I kind of, in terms of the big quotes, I've got that, I'm just going to roll out the lame cliche. The big quote I was saying is, don't think, why is this happening to me? Think, why is this happening for me? What can I learn from it? And it's something I always have to say to myself, again, when I'm having, rough days or whatever else. For some reason, there's a really cheesy quote that was actually in one of my old offices that said, your comfort zone is a lovely place. It's nice and it's warm and it's comforting and nothing ever grows there. I guess if you're stuck in a bit of a situation where you're feeling like you're just in a bit of a rut and you might be comfortable but you're not feeling inspired or anything like that, then just think life is short, and what is the worst that can happen? Because if something, don't be afraid to fail. Had I come to Australia and literally not really been able to do much beyond working kind of catering or retail, which is still there's nothing wrong with that at all, but let's hypothetically that's still a big thing to have gone and done a sabbatical, travelled around. And the thing is, even just going into another country and doing something there feels like a big thing. It feels like a momentous thing. You're learning new things every day. You're challenging yourself. It's getting yourself out of your friendship group and trying to interact and socialise with new people. And the friendship circle I have here is much more varied and diverse than the same friendship group I had back home, which I still had lots of diverse friendship groups back home, but they were kind of all either by circumstance of where you grew up, or they were by kind of interest, whether that's musicians or football fans or whatever else. And here I've got such a weird blend of friends, whether that's just randoms that you meet on a night out or a friend of a friend. And I guess that's a very long-winded answer.
I love it. I think that says everything that needs to be said, really.
Yeah, I'd say, the short answer would be listen to Hatebreed. But,
Listen to Hatebreed. Excellent. Well, I think that I've had a wonderful chat. Thank you so much, Alex, and we'll chat soon and catch up again soon, yeah?
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me, and thanks to all of your listeners for supporting what you're doing, because I love the fact that your podcast keeps growing and growing and growing, and the guests you're getting is amazing. So thank you to the listeners for listening to me ramble on, but thank you more importantly for supporting my good friend in his podcast.
Thank you for checking out that episode. I really hope you enjoyed it, and I would love to know what you think of the podcast. If there's anything you'd like more of, less of, if there's anything I should change, or any types of guests you would like on the show, that kind of stuff really helps me out, and I appreciate you reaching out. If you did enjoy that episode, a couple of recommendations for you. The episode was Faris Jacob, What is the Reality of Digital Nomad Life and What are the Benefits for Employers, was absolutely amazing, and I think you'd really enjoy it. Another great one was with Alexander Travelbaum, How does long-term travel on a budget help personal growth. That was a really wonderful podcast that I think you'll enjoy, especially if you're thinking about moving country or anything of the sort. And the last recommendation I've got for you, because I am recommending it to everyone at the moment, is the episode with Nikki McGlynn. What is neurodevelopment therapy and how could it help you? That is an episode that I think could really help a lot of people, and encourage everyone to check it out and share it about if possible. So thank you for listening, and I will catch you next time.
Look around, not be able to find any jobs. Go work in a bar for 6 months, learn to surf, travel, and go back home. That is the worst thing that could happen. But what's the best thing?